This episode of Every Edition is sponsored by Dragonshorn Studios. Check out their Kickstarter for Rughalt's Grimoire of Dungeon Adventures, running through November 2022, which will deliver 5 fully realized and ready-to-play dungeons for 5th and 3rd editions of the world's most popular role-playing game. Available digitally, in print, or as premium modules for Foundry Virtual Tabletop, Roll20, and Shard Tabletop. Go to dragonshorn.com to check out all their virtual tabletop and digital adventures.
Hello and welcome to Every Edition. My name's Jesse.
I'm Jon.
Today we are going to talk about some Spelljammer supplementary things in our Loot the Body segment.
You bet we are. It certainly needs help.
Yeah, we a couple episodes ago we had talked about Spelljammer and featured it, and this is a good sign for things to come, I think.
Yeah. And our random encounter today, we're going to be talking about AI art and its implications for tabletop role-playing games.
Don't want it. Not going to buy it.
Yeah, well, and we waited until everybody calmed down so that we could have a reasonable discussion about it. So off we go.
And of course, our morale check, where we talk about news of the week and news of things going on in the RPG world. But first, Jon, what's new?
Well, so I am signed up for not one, but 2 conventions coming up.
Okay.
So I know I've been talking a little bit on the show about PAX Unplugged coming up in December.
Super excited.
Looking forward to that. But I also found out that there's actually a local convention that's moving to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and it's called MIPA Con.
MIPA.
The Mid-Eastern Pennsylvania Convention.
That's so specific.
MIPA. That's right. Yeah. So looking forward to it. It's going to be the first year that it's going to be held in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And it's going to be my first time going. That's coming up in November, so this month. And so I'll report back. I'm signed up for a bunch of Castles and Crusades games and a bunch of Dungeon Crawl Classics games. Of course. So great opportunity to play 2 games that I love and don't get a chance to play as much as I'd like.
Yeah, I think I'd really want to try Castles and Crusades because I've yet to try that, and the system really seems really fun.
It's the jam. Yeah. So Jesse, what's new?
Well, this last month, October, all throughout the month, and every year during October on my stream, we focus on like specifically horror-related games and things like that.
Cool.
Sometimes we'll create some or do some like creative writing. In previous years, we've created our own like lore and stuff because I like world building. Yeah. This year, I decided to start a project that I'm not going to talk about here. It is exclusive to my stream, but it is a horror world building exercise, really, where myself and the community sort of get together and create this like mini world that's all horror and sort of nostalgic horror too. So like think like slasher horror. Things like that. It's been super fun. We were doing it a couple times a week all throughout the month, and it was really a good sort of break from my normal world building because my normal world building is very much like fantasy, and sometimes I pepper in a little bit of like Cthulhu-esque horror, but not nearly as much as I would prefer because I know some people really don't like that. So it's like very high fantasy. So this was a fun sort of get rid of the elves and talk about what kind of killers you can make and how you can make things scary. And
cool.
This is really fun.
So where can people find your world building?
So on World Anvil, I've talked about it a million times on the podcast before. You can search for the World Illyria. I could potentially leave a link down in the comments.
There you go.
For anybody willing to look there. So that'll have links to all the things that I've created that are public for the fantasy world. The horror stuff is not public, but even if you don't want to like read anything about my world, there's tons and tons of worlds and lore and things like that for D&D or for other settings or created settings on the World Anvil website that you can just sort of randomly click through. So yeah, you can follow my link or just go to worldanvil.com.
Great.
All right, it's time for a morale check. Our morale checks are where we take a look at RPG news and things going on in our industry of the time. And as a reoccurring theme or a happenstance that's going on in our episodes, we talk about Free League a lot.
Yeah.
Free League has just announced that they'll be publishing Pirate Borg. which funded back in March. And we talked about it, I think, during the actual Kickstarter, or very close to it.
Yep.
In partnership with Luke Stratton, who is also known as Limithron on Kickstarter. It was making the convention circuit this past summer. This sort of elevates Pirate Borg amongst the Mork Borg community.
Yeah.
So, like, Mork Borg, I think, has really, at least in the convention space, really become like a sort of cult hit. And there's all sorts of third-party Mork Borg related content.
Yep.
And Pirate Borg took off like wildfire.
Yep. Yeah, huge Kickstarter. It was Pirate Borg was running at Origins. I'm sure it was running at Gen Con.
Yeah.
And you're right. Mork Borg seems to be a hit. It's going to be there are going to be some games at PAX Unplugged. I'm hoping to get signed up for at least one. But yeah, you said it. This elevates it to the level of like an official Mork Borg product because it's being released by Free League.
Yeah, it's official.
So, wow.
That's pretty great.
In other news, our friends at Dragonshorn Studios are at it again. They have a new Kickstarter for Rughalt's Grimoire of Dungeon Adventures running through November 2022, featuring 5 fully developed dungeons for multiple levels of play with new monsters and magic items and spells. Dragonshorn Studios is sponsoring this episode, and this is the second time they've been a sponsor, so thank you very much.
You to them.
They're a small family-owned game company from Poland, and they release really high-quality PDF and virtual tabletop releases for 5th edition and 3.5. So definitely worth checking out this Rughalt's Grimoire of Dungeon Adventures. Like I said, it's going to have 5 dungeons with traps and riddles and treasure, hand-drawn maps.
That's what I like.
Yeah.
The hand-drawn stuff. Maps, I'm all for it. That and the magic items.
Right.
I am a sucker for magic items.
There you go.
And I think most of the time in some modules or like third-party stuff, you get like a description of a magic item, but you don't get a picture of it.
Yeah.
So I can say whatever I want to my players, but being able to show it to them and be like, this is what your character has, that holds a little bit more weight, and I like that.
Big deal. So new monsters, in addition to those new magic items and all that good stuff. The Grimoire, this is going to be their second physical release, but it's also going to be available as a interactive PDF and as a premium module for virtual tabletops. Yes. So 3 different ways that you can experience this. Head on over to Kickstarter and let's help fund it.
Oh, yeah. So from Mongoose Publishing, we've got Paranoia Perfect Edition.
Ooh.
I played Paranoia, I don't know the last time I played, like 10 years ago.
Really?
Before the most recent edition of the game.
Okay.
So the last edition was Paranoia Red Clearance Edition.
Right.
That came out in 2017. But it used a lot of like cards and card packs that you like supplementary things to the main game if you wanted to play the game, which I think made the game less approachable. Like if you're playing a board game or a game similar to that, and you have to buy supplementary things just to play the game or feel like you're playing with everybody else on the same level, it doesn't feel good. Yeah,
it's a barrier.
So this new re-release is basically axing all of that stuff and just sort of makes it easier to jump in with. It seems like the type of game that's more competitive than it is cooperative.
Right.
Everybody has their own sort of secret agenda in this game, which might be working with the bad guy a little bit to sort of mess with your partner, or make sure that you're the only one on top by the end of the game.
Right.
It's sort of dog eat dog, but you're trying to do it secretly, and I think those kind of games are particularly fun.
Yeah, good for a one shot. I don't know that Paranoia makes for a good ongoing campaign. I'd love to hear people say otherwise.
Yeah, I'm curious.
The basic premise with Paranoia, it's like a tongue-in-cheek dystopian future where everything is run by a master computer, and you are what's known as a troubleshooter, right? And so your job is to find trouble and shoot it. Right, which is just brilliant.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But oftentimes it's about sort of like, you have a secret agenda to like take out somebody at the table.
Yeah,
but make it look like somebody else did.
Yeah. So you don't get caught or whatever.
Yeah.
I like that kind of intrigue.
Yeah.
But it would be difficult to make that span over the course of like a campaign or a couple sessions. So I'm curious to know if there's anybody who has played Paranoia to that extent. The game's been out since like the late 80s.
Right.
So I'm sure there are tables that have done that. I've just not experienced that.
Yeah, me neither. And finally, similar to a new edition of Paranoia coming out, there's a new edition of Kids on Bikes coming out. It's currently on Kickstarter. A second edition. There's a cute little infomercial style video.
Good. So good.
And players who are already familiar with the original edition, it says that you're going to be able to get an inexpensive PDF in order to update your game. I have no idea what that means. Literally, that's what it says. I don't know if that's $1, $2, or I don't know. But there will be a way to upgrade your game without having to buy a new book. But the new stuff in the book includes a set of expanded storytelling tools for game masters, more rules around powered characters, like 11. Not that this is anything like Stranger Things. And integrated into the core rulebook, the actual use of bikes. Which, if you're going to name your game Kids on Bikes...
You got to have bikes.
You might want to have a mechanic for bikes. I don't know. But so the first edition of the game was originally kickstarted back in 2017, around the same time that the last edition of Paranoia came out. And so I've got a question for you, gentle listeners, noble listeners. When is the right amount of time before a new edition comes out?
Every year.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is both these games? It's 5 years, and there's now a new edition coming out. Now we are every edition, and so we embrace all editions of all games, but that doesn't mean that we're stupid, and it doesn't mean that we don't recognize a cash grab.
Yes.
And so, what do you think, especially about these two particular games that in a 5-year span of time are both coming out with new editions? Are these needed? Are these two different animals in terms of games? What do you think? Let us know in the comments or get in touch with us. everyeditionrpg@gmail.com. You can also find links to all of our socials at everyeditionrpg.com. We've got links to Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that good stuff. So interact with us. We've got YouTube shorts coming out just about every day, so you can get a bite-sized dose of every edition. Don't forget to like those. And, if you want to play them 2 or 3 times, they're short.
They're short. Yeah, why not?
Why not, right? But we really appreciate your support, and reach out.
Okay, it's time for a random encounter. On today's random encounter, we are talking about artificial intelligence art in the tabletop role-playing space.
Is that even a thing?
Apparently. A lot of people online, like a month ago, got really, really annoyed by it.
Yeah.
So we sort of let the dust settle.
Yes.
We gathered our thoughts, and we compiled a bit of a list of talking points that we want to talk about and sort of look at it objectively. And then, sort of go through like the problems with AI art,
right?
What sort of problems arise because of it, the potential of the art itself, and then our personal and sort of final thoughts going into this.
I will fully admit I'm a coward. Like when it comes to like controversial topics, I am actually much more comfortable waiting for the dust to settle and then trying to have a rational conversation about it.
Yeah. So I am the opposite.
I know you are.
When everything was happening online, so there was it was called the Kawaii Steam NATO, which was a PDF.
Yeah.
On Drive-Through or DM's Guild or one of those.
Yep.
That was the initial sort of spark.
The steampunk weapons and armor.
Yeah. That, as a cover image to use in AI art, and I think they were charging like $5 or something for the module. When that happened and came out, and I was reading through everybody's comments, I could quite literally feel my blood boiling.
Right.
But we'll get to that.
We're
going to talk about that in time and our personal thoughts in a minute.
Yes.
Until then, what is AI art?
I don't know.
So, AI art, or art using an artificial intelligence, is not a new thing. It's actually been around for quite a bit. AI has been slowly developing as computers have become more and more powerful, and it was sort of a matter of time before it reached the art space. It's essentially a program that is trained, or it learns what art is and what we consider art. So it looks at words or vocabulary. It looks at images associated with those, and it essentially, almost like a person. I'm sort of boiling it down a little bit.
Sure.
Almost like a person, it learns what art is. So most of these programs, some of them are free, some of them are paid. You can just type in like a simple sentence, like a monkey holding a banana, and it'll spit out a couple images of what the AI believes a monkey holding a banana would look like. And you can tweak it to your heart's desire. You can add in some styles or some sizing or whatnot. You can make it look sort of hyper-realistic or whatever. There's infinite possibilities with this, but that's sort of what AI art is in a nutshell.
So it's taking like a sampling, right, of different images and sort of it's creating something new.
Correct.
But based on what it samples from the internet, right?
Sorta. So like, it's not a collage. A lot of people misinterpret it as a collage. Like it thinks that, oh, we're taking the smile or whatever smirk from Mona Lisa and putting it on this directly. It's not that.
Okay.
The same way your brain, when you think, oh, this is what a horse looks like, and you go to draw a horse, you reference whatever in your brain says is a horse before you draw it. It's doing that, except it's like a computer, so it can do that infinitely better than you could.
Its sample size is the whole internet.
It is huge. Right? Yeah, most are huge. They're trained on, large batches of art.
Okay. But it is creating something new.
Correct.
Right? I guess that's the first sort of point of clarification to get out there. It's not copying, right?
So there are instances that have come up of people. So most of these AI art generators, you can upload an image to it and say, I want you to, artificially add to this image and change it up a little bit. So some people have taken art that other artists have done and warped it with AI art directly. And that's where you start getting into the really muddy copyright sort of arguments.
Okay.
But if you just type in a sentence and it spits out an image, that is brand new, never seen before, never seen again.
All right. Well, so let's get into what the problems are. Why people a month ago, and maybe still, were afraid of AI art or angry with AI art. Why there was so much emotion around it. And it seemed to be, honestly, so much negative emotion.
Yes, a lot of negative emotion.
A lot of negativity. So what's the problem with AI art?
People really don't like change. And it really sort of comes around when a new tool, especially for artists, when a new tool is introduced, the world sorts, like their world starts to like fall apart. So if you think about when maybe like Photoshop or digital drawing was first sort of becoming a thing, or digital tablets and things like that, a lot of traditional artists were kind of like, I'm going to lose my job because the animation is so much easier. Right. Drawing is so much easier and quicker. You don't have to worry about buying, products and things like that. Every time there's a major shift in any part of human nature, people are going to like resist it because it's not their norm. It's not what they're used to. But with AI specifically, you kind of mentioned it. There's like a sort of fear of being obsolete, and I think sort of as we get further into the 21st century, we're starting to realize the power of artificial intelligence and the power of computing and what that might mean for people with their jobs and things like that. So I think there's a little bit of fear in there too. Like artists are maybe afraid that they're going to be fully replaced by AI art. Yeah.
It seemed like the most angry or fearful voices out there, for them this was a kitchen table issue. Like this was oh my gosh, how am I going to continue to make a living?
Yeah.
Right? The way I am an artist, and this is going to replace me. and so some of that fear about the pocketbook, right? And I think it's also not it's not an accident that there was all this fear at a time where the economy's not doing so great.
Exactly.
Right? And so everybody's already sort of on edge and, and paying a little bit more attention maybe to their bank accounts than they had been.
Yeah.
And so this comes along and it's like, well, great. So not only one more thing, right? Not only is the economy in the toilet, but so, now I'm going to lose my job, right? As an artist.
As a starving artist.
Right. So that's real, right? That's a problem. And that's not just, expanding the conversation a little bit. If you think about artificial intelligence, that is sort of the concern for lots of different occupations,
yes.
Right? That it's going to accelerate already sort of the way in which robots and machines have been replacing human labor.
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically about artificial intelligence for driving vehicles, driving cars and trucks and things like that. Is it going to replace truck drivers? Is it going to replace, cab drivers have already been replaced by Uber drivers, but is it going to replace Uber drivers, right? Or Lyft drivers or whatever. And so this just brings it into the art space, right? In the same way that I think other people have already been concerned about artificial intelligence and its implications. So is this going to decimate, lower paying gig work?
No.
Right?
No.
Yeah.
So the issue with the PDF from specifically DM's Guild or Drive-Thru, whichever one it was, in the tabletop space, there was a lot of people talking like, okay, well, you could have paid an artist to do that cover for you. Why did you do that?
Right.
And the person who created this module put it up for, a small amount. It was like $2 or $5 or something. Maybe they didn't have the budget to make the art themselves or pay somebody to do it for them. Any chance I get, if I have enough free spending money, I love commissioning artists for art that I can't personally do. But sometimes you just don't have it. And this person, if they didn't have the money to pay somebody to do the art for them, they weren't going to pay an artist anyway.
Right.
They didn't have it in their budget when they started the project to pay an artist, so they just used this tool to put an image on the cover, because if you sell a module that has an image is going to look a lot better and sell a lot better than one that doesn't. Yeah.
So intention matters, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not, if you're a creator on a very small level, and you basically, your intention is, I don't have a budget for art. That's not something I'm gonna include. And you would otherwise release your PDF without a cover.
Yeah.
Right. That person now can create a cover image on their own.
Yep. Very quickly.
Very quickly. So yeah, I mean, your point is that then is not a loss of gig work, because that person was never going to spend money on a cover image.
Correct.
In the first place. But so back to intention, right? The problem is, if you are a game company or a corporation who does have an art budget, and in order to begin to save, right, or to cut costs, you switch to using AI art.
You can all the artists and just that is a problem.
Yeah.
And will likely, once AI art and sort of 3D generation and things like that become better than they are now, which is like an exponential growth type of thing.
Right.
That will likely be an issue. Is it currently an issue? Not really. There's been a couple of there was a comic book cover for Image Comics where the artist used AI art in their cover, but that's all commission based.
Right.
They submitted that as their commission. I've yet to see any big, at least in the tabletop or the video game industry, any big sort of waves of, okay, AI art's here, goodbye artists. I don't think that's anything that we have to worry about now, but it may be a thing in the future.
Right. So that seems like the the far, maybe not that far off, but that being sort of the primary, what seems like legitimate problem or concern. So it's not, it's not coming after the small time.
Fiverr or Etsy or whatever.
Yeah, right. Or the person who's making their first PDF adventure.
Yeah.
Right, like that. This is potentially a good thing for that person, right? But for artists who are on the payroll of a corporation, I'd be a little bit more. I don't know. I guess I'd be a little bit more nervous.
Yeah, it's understandable to be nervous in that situation.
So we're already sort of swirling around it here, but let's move on to talking about the potential of AI art when it comes to tabletop role-playing games, and why there is also some enthusiasm for it. Why there are people who are excited about it. I saw plenty of people on Twitter and social media that were saying, I am never going to spend money on a product that uses artificial intelligence. And I also saw plenty of people saying, wow, I can't wait to try this.
Yeah.
Right? And so there we are. There was definitely people that were, making it almost like a moral stance. And some people who were more excited by it and saw the potential. So let's talk a little bit about that side of the equation.
So I think it's, I just want to preface this with a tweet that I had made on my personal account was featured on the Philip DeFranco show. He was talking about AI art when this was occurring in a positive light. I was saying in a positive light. So I think my stance is very much on the hopeful potential side. My biggest point is this sort of accessibility of it.
Right.
So you have someone who's making a module of some sort, and maybe they've typed it up in like Word or some free software that they might have, and they just need a little bit of something extra to make it pop so they can try to make money, so that in the future maybe they can pay an artist to make a proper one. All they need is the art. The potential is there. It takes 5 seconds. You have an image. You really like it. Boom, there you go. The accessibility is the biggest point to me. Anybody, it's free, most of them are free, can make art, which is such a big point that I don't see a lot of people making, is that also people with disabilities, that or people who might not have sort of seen the creative bit inside them, they generate art with this for whatever reason, and they sort of, they realize that they're creative now. And they're like, oh man, I really like this. I really want to paint this. Like, sure, that seems great. The potential, also, I guess, if you're a traditional artist, you've likely either gone to school or you've spent a lot of time developing your skills as a traditional artist. Somebody who just, they've been playing D&D for 10 years and they're like, hey, I really want to write a book or write my own module. They've not spent the last 10 years on art. They've spent the last 10 years playing games. So they might not have the skills to do the art stuff. So like, if it just breaks down like one more barrier, I think it's a positive.
Unlocking potential, right? Giving people an opportunity to enter into creative spaces that otherwise might not enter into those creative spaces, right? And I do think, the argument in favor of artificial intelligence in the space of art is that it really is a tool, right? Just like any other, just like when photography was first introduced, right? And people were afraid that was going to replace, landscape painters and portrait artists and things like that. And it didn't, right? Those skills are still needed. Those are still sought after. If anything, and here's an interesting way to think about it. If anything, those forms of art have actually been elevated because of photography, right? Because you can take an image from your phone now and anywhere. If you have a portrait done, right?
That's real special.
That's really special and really expensive. Right? And like that, you would sit for an artist or they would take your picture and then they would paint you and stuff. And to have that portrait, wow, right? Like that elevates that level of human expression. Are there as many painted portraits being done today as there were 100 years ago? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Probably not.
I don't know. But at the end of the day, there are still people making painting portraits.
Yeah, making a living.
And making a living doing that. So it's a tool, right? The other thing too, and again, this is in terms of potential, right? The reason I tend to think of it in this realm of being just another tool is you can sort of notice, at least at this point, I can sort of tell, like, Midjourney is the program that
the big one
I'm most familiar with. It has a particular kind of default style.
Yeah, it has a style,
right? That you can sort of point it out and you can say, like, oh, that was made with Midjourney. It's kind of like pixely, like kind of put together.
It prefers certain faces.
Yeah. But if you put up a row of images, I'm sure I could be tricked, right? Because you can get that deep into Midjourney and the way in which you put in your requests and stuff. But just on the surface, if you're just playing around with it, Midjourney is pretty recognizable. And so to me, then, it is the part of the potential is a starting point.
Yes.
Not an end point, but like, hey, I want to get an idea for what this might look like. Let me just kind of type in some things. Here's a rough sketch. It looks like it was created with Midjourney, so now I would want to take this to an artist.
Exactly.
Right, so it does like the rendering.
Yeah, rendering, right? Or like, if you're having difficulties explaining via text to an artist like what you want commissioned,
right?
It's infinitely easier to go to a AI art generator and be like, okay, well, I want elements from this, and I want it to look similar to this. Do what you can. I like your style.
Right.
That kind of thing. It's a really good starting point. I personally don't think that Midjourney should be the end point if you're going to like charge people money.
Right.
But that's like a personal type of thing.
Yeah.
I think, again, like the barrier, like if this is the last thing that you need for your RPG book to go out, like just do it. Make some money. Maybe commission an artist for something that you really wanted, and switch it up or not. It doesn't really matter. Midjourney's or AI art's just a tool, just like Photoshop is a tool, and just like a paintbrush is a tool. You can't do it, sort of without it.
Yeah. So the idea of the sort of raising the value of handmade, right, stuff like the portrait artist or what have you. It strikes me that this is similar to thinking about something being factory made versus handmade, like a craft or something like that, and sort of that handmade item being considered more desirable in a lot of cases than a factory made product. Same thing here, maybe with artificial intelligence and art, right? It also reminds me a lot of music and some of the changes that have been happening in the world of music with the introduction of computers. Right around the turn of the century, we switched from recording music on tape, right, to recording music on a computer, by and large, and that did have an effect. In the early 2000s, a lot of small to mid studios closed.
Yeah, because they couldn't afford it.
Like, right, and no one was, and it became easier to get to have your own home studio.
Yeah.
Right. And so you would have your computer, you would download the software, and you could record from your house. So in that sense, it democratized recording, which had an impact of, closing some smaller studios. It also created some new smaller studios, though, in people's homes.
Sure.
Right? And gave more people access to recording music than they ever had before. Now, what did that do? Well, there is more music arguably being recorded and released now than there ever has been. In fact, maybe there's so much music being recorded and released now that it's a lot of noise. Like, it's hard to find, good stuff, right? Are we going to saturate the world with crappy AI images, right? And that's going to be hard to kind of sift through it all. I don't know, but it does give people more access. Just like home recording, people have more access with computers and home recording than they did having to go to a studio and record on magnetic tape.
Yeah.
Right. Now more people have access to art. it's a yes and no.
So talking about music, back in the early 2000s, there was also the sort of influx of auto-tune.
Right.
And sort of one of the first people to really make use of that, so much so that he was like sort of made fun of it, was T-Pain. So T-Pain has talked about this a lot on his Twitch channel.
Okay.
He's a super open guy about it. But a lot of the R&B artists at the time were like shunning him for using this new technology as a tool. And if you think about popular music now, it's all auto-tune.
Right.
And then they sing live and you're like, oh my God, it's a totally different person. It's like, no, you're not listening to a computer.
Right.
So this is sort of one of those things where, like, you know, times are changing. A new tool has been introduced. No one knows what's going to happen yet. And we've got to sort of wait it out. And I think, you know, there's likely going to be as these tools develop, there's going to be an influx of people who use it and saturate the world with art or AI generated art. But eventually, unless it becomes this super great thing, it might boil down to just the people who will care about it.
Right.
And maybe everybody will have an AI generated art app on their phone, and maybe they might use it once in a while because it's fun and it's cool, just like your camera app or whatever. But it won't be such a big thing that everybody's using it, or it's, you know.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to final thoughts and our personal take. But let's do that by focusing with a question.
Okay.
All right. So is AI art?
Yes.
Tell me more.
Okay. So in the beginning of the segment, I had mentioned that everybody's replies and things like that were getting my blood boiling.
Yeah.
I am definitely the type of person to just like jump in, make a bunch of tweets that nobody's ever going to read, and argue back and forth with people, which is probably not a good idea ever. But I like that sort of, I like getting into discussion. I like trying to be positive with the discussions. Everybody sort of comes out of it knowing a little bit more, even if they're still sort of in their own corners, that kind of thing. I like the discourse. And a big thing is AI art? A lot of people say no, because a lot of people have the misconception that AI is taking bits and pieces of different art and just sort of gluing them together and making it look nice and smudging it around. Right. Which, by the way, is what a lot of artists already do. Right. Using Photoshop and other sort of digital tools. That's a different topic. It just, I think, comes from a little bit of ignorance and a little bit of unwillingness to sort of change and things like that. But these are also the same sort of people who would say, like, you know, it took 4 seconds to type in a sentence and make some art. Anybody can do that. Why are you selling this for $5 when I could have done that? Right. And then the next question from me is, well, why didn't you? Right. If you can do it, then do it. Right. Like, if this person's making money, then you can too. Like, it's the same as, like, I used to kind of be in this, I'm not a very, or at least I wasn't a very big abstract art type of person. If I looked at art, I wanted it to be art, traditional art. And, you know, a full canvas that's just painted sort of eggshell white and selling for $1 million at the time didn't really sort of come across as art to me, which, like, you know, that's a debate. Sure. Or like someone taping or nailing a banana to a wall. Like, is that art? Well, yes. And and then you'd have people say, well, I could do that. Okay, well, then you're back to the you should do it then. Right. It is art because the AI knows what a hand is. It learned, just like a human did, by looking at hands and saying, that's a hand, and learning how to draw that. Just like a human did, except it's a computer, and it did it 10,000 times faster than you did. Right. And it's constantly being updated, and it's constantly learning. So it is art, whether you want it to be or not. Yeah. I think maybe your personal definition of what art is might differ, but it's art. Yeah. So my response to the question is not an emphatic yes. It's a maybe, right? So is AI art? Maybe.
That's my take. And for me, the definition of art has always required there to be an audience.
Sure.
Right? So in order for anything to be considered art, this is the definition I like. In order for anything to be considered art, it needs to have viewers and people who are talking about it and voicing their thoughts about it and how it's affecting them and talking about it. You need an audience. If you don't have an audience, you don't have art. Just like if you don't have an audience, you don't really have a podcast, right? Like,
yeah. So screaming in the nether.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
I think you need an audience. So there's a lot of images being made right now. Most of them are not art.
I think that's fair.
Because no one is appreciating them. They don't have an audience. But as soon as it becomes a cover image of something and somebody pays $2 for it and other people say, why are you doing that? That is an affront to everything. That literally is what art is. It causes visceral reactions, right? Like that is some of the greatest art in art history, right? Made people upset.
Yeah, think about Warhol
right.
and his Campbell soups. Like,
yeah. And it upended people's definitions of what art was. But at the end of the day, the common denominator has always been an audience. It doesn't mean the audience likes it. It just means there's been an audience, right? Whether you like it or not, that's whatever. That's not what we're talking about. So is AI art? Maybe. Most of it, I think, isn't.
Sure.
But that's just because it doesn't have an audience. But as soon as it has an audience, as soon as it's getting attention, as soon as it's on the cover, of a work, it's art.
I think AI also has like extreme potential for world building when it comes to tabletop stuff. I'll take a look through either things that I'm creating or things that the community is creating and be like, okay, well, that thing there looks like a really cool magic item.
Right.
So I'm going to see what I can create off of that. Or this looks like a really cool landscape. Maybe I want my players to go there.
Right.
And it's a really quick and really cool way to create a visual for something that I've created like either in my head or like with words or something like that I can either have like as the home page of my World Anvil site for that, or something that I can quick show my players. Like the other day, or maybe like a month ago now, last time we played D&D, I had a sort of nonsensical Cthulhu-esque horror notebook or a spell book. And ahead of time, I had pre-generated some AI images of a spell book that kind of looked nonsensical on the inside, and I showed it to all the players. And it sort of, at least for me, added a little bit more reality to the lore and sort of world building that we're doing together. Yeah,
no, it's a great. If you're a home brewer, it does seem like a great way to get a visual aid. And to be able to sort of customize it and have a little bit of control, so that you can tailor it to your specific want or need. So I see that as one of its greatest potentials, right? For the tabletop role-playing game industry, for homebrew DMs and GMs to be able to have images for what they're doing with their players. That's awesome. I also think, too, personally, this is my personal take, it does excite me a little bit to want to enter into the tabletop game-making space in a way that words alone might not. And and so I don't know if that means that I would want to create something. I don't know. It gives me pause, though, too, because I don't like doing things in isolation.
Sure.
That's why there's right. That's why
there's two of us.
There's two of us, and why I like being in the same room.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's a collaboration with another human being. I think that is one of the potential things that you could lose if you're doing everything yourself, including generating the art using artificial intelligence and all that. That becomes pretty isolating and pretty lonely. In a way that collaborating with an artist can be invigorating and give you ideas that you wouldn't have by yourself.
Very true.
So that's one of the places that gives me pause. I really like collaborating with other human beings. That would compel me to use an artist more than almost any other argument.
Mm-hmm. If one more person sees and generates some art because it's either on their Instagram filter or TikTok filter or something they see on Facebook or whatever, and they decide that they see something really unique and really cool that sparks something inside them, that either they see this and they oh man, I could really create some really cool magic items, or I really want to learn how to paint this with oil paints, or this would be really cool, this looks like an old school photograph, maybe I'll go pick up an old Polaroid. If AI can bring another person that has been sort of down on themselves, I can't do that because I'm not creative, I can't do this because of this or this or that, I think it's a net positive. And I think that breaking down any barriers because of handicaps or inabilities to have time to learn these skills, I think is a win.
So let us know what you think. How do you see AI art and its effect on tabletop role-playing games? Are you excited by it? Are you planning to use it in your homebrew campaign or use it to create your own games? Or are you never going to touch the stuff?
Have you made it this far in the video?
Yeah. Let us know. Drop a comment or send us a note. everyeditionrpg@gmail.com. You can also find links to all of our socials at everyeditionrpg.com. We've got links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and much, much more. Lots of different ways you can support the show. We've got merch for sale, including coffee mugs and T-shirts. We've also got our Ko-Fi, if you want to send us a tip, and our Patreon. So thanks for supporting Every Edition, whether it's with a couple bucks or with a comment and a like.
It's time to loot the body. On today's Loot the Body, we are taking a look at something that we have been sorely in need of, the Illuminhaughti's Spelljammer releases.
Yeah.
Their various releases, including the Voidfarer's sort of line.
Right.
And one of their adventures, the
Blackjack's Revenge.
Blackjack's Revenge. So we had talked about Spelljammer a couple episodes ago.
Right.
And one of the things that I thought was just mind-blowing was when you told me that if you add up the page numbers of all three books, it doesn't really even equal one book.
Right.
And then you look at Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and that's a full book, almost double in length,
right,
that has so much more in it. And they had the audacity to make 3 books and a slipcover out of it, which was like,
yeah,
it's a good premise. I'm happy that they brought Spelljammer to 5th edition.
Right.
But it just wasn't quite enough. And until now, I've not really had the drive to play Spelljammer. Like when it was coming out or when it was announced, I was really excited. Like, okay, we're going to take my homebrew adventure and we're going to take a Spelljammer and we're going to go somewhere really fun. But then the books came out and I haven't really looked at them since our episode about it. So this has been interesting. This has been good.
Yeah, I mean the Spelljammer setting is so great, and we have dumped on it so much.
Yeah,
right. At least the 5th edition release, and deservedly so. That Illuminhaughti was nice enough to reach out and send us a bunch of their Spelljammer support products, and I was impressed.
Yes,
because it's filling a void for a setting that I love, and making it possible, I think, for you to be able to enjoy Spelljammer and make up for all the wizards' problems.
Yeah. They saw a need and they filled the need.
Filled the need.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So thank you, Illuminhaughti, for sharing all these PDFs. It's also worth noting this is the first time that we are spotlighting in our Loot the Body segment a digital release.
Yes.
And so Illuminhaughti's products are PDF only, available on DriveThruRPG and GM's Guild. And the line of Voidfarer's guides is pretty extensive. The latest one, which we've been featuring here, if you're watching on the video, is the Voidfarer's Guide to Fashion Week, which is a little tongue-in-cheek, title. But what it does is it has a lot of different space suits And those spacesuits are featured as magic items. And so for a couple bucks, you get a bunch of different spacesuits, and it's cool to think about that as a magic item. Again, the Spelljammer three-book set was sorely lacking in magic items.
It had like 6.
Yeah. So here you go. You can fill in that crack. There's also a fantastic supplement called Spelljammer Lost Ships Rediscovered. And so if you are hungry for more variants of ships and even better fleshed out in terms of stats kinds of ships for Spelljammer, I would highly recommend checking out that release as well. And then we mentioned at the top of this segment, Blackjammer's Revenge. And so if Light of Xerxes is not the type of adventure that you're looking for, Blackjammer's Revenge might be. It's obviously, as the title suggests, a little bit more of a pirate theme.
Yeah, I mean, you're using ships.
Right,
so
to Spelljammer, which I think the whole pirate aspect is, I think, an exciting and cool aspect to Spelljammer.
It sort of felt like in the books, the WotC books, that the aspect of space combat or astral plane combat, or wherever you are with your Spelljammer, or inner ship combat, wasn't really a thing. It was just sort of like, here's how you get from one world to another, or one plane to another. And they just sort of forgot about the travel in between there. Right. So having that sort of pirate-esque, you try to make seafaring adventures. Yep. You're just taking that into space. Exactly. So you want to have some play there. Yeah. And there's a lot of other PDF releases. They have a couple different bundles available on DM's Guild. So you can save a couple bucks if you buy in bulk. So check out illuminhaughti's different Spelljammer releases in PDF. If you're going to be doing Spelljammer, you're going to be doing some homework. Yes. And I think that this line of PDFs will help you with that. So if you're already spelljamming or you're planning to spelljam, check out illuminhaughti's stuff on DM's Guild. Well, John, I am definitely looking forward to reading the comments of this episode. I legitimately am. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of good conversation that needs to happen around AI art, specifically in our little corner of the world, in the RPG world. Right. This steampunk release really stirred the pot, but now we need to sort of stand back and look at it like adults and figure out where we're going to go from here. So, like, if you do have an opinion, no matter how strong, keep it respectful. But I would really, really love to hear your thoughts, and maybe we can talk about it even again on a further episode. Bring it back and see where we're at in a little bit. And thank you to illuminhaughti again for the Spelljammer PDFs. These are fantastic. Again, something I've been looking forward to running for our group and definitely going to use in our game. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, Dragonshorn Studios. They have been putting out some pretty high quality PDFs and stuff for your virtual tabletop. I know their newest release I am likely going to use on Roll20. Yeah. I've been liking Roll20 a little bit more lately for things, as we've sort of experimented with various games like Alien and Cyberpunk and things like that. So I definitely want to check it out there. Yep. Yeah, Dragonshorn has the support for Roll20. It's got support for Foundry Virtual Tabletop and for Shard Tabletop. Their latest Kickstarter right now, Rughalt's Grimoire of Dungeon Adventures. Check it out. Let's get that funded. And like Jesse said, thanks again, Dragonshorn Studios, for sponsoring another episode of Every Edition. We love working with you, and let's keep the relationship going. And of course, thank you, noble listeners, for being with us on this journey. And we'll be back for more.